Hey everyone, welcome back to Trek on the Tube. Today we're talking Star Trek Discovery, Season 3, Episode 4, Forget Me Not. First my thoughts and opinions, and then the Easter eggs, as usual. Let's jump right in. Considering I didn't very much like the previous episode, this was, for me, a big step up. This episode slowed things down, and instead of cramming as much explosions and fights as possible into its 50 minutes runtime, which is something Discovery enjoys doing, it rather focused on the internal struggle of our characters. On the ship, we dealt with mental health and how stress, anxiety, depression can manifest itself in different ways in different people, and on the planet's surface, we went on a literal voyage inside of Adira's psyche and mind in order to not only unlock the secrets needed to find what remains of the Federation and move the bigger plot along, but also begin her healing process after what was clearly a traumatic transition from being a regular human to host of a Trill symbiont. It wasn't boring, I want to throw that out there. It was slow and reflective in its nature, kind of like how Family, the episode Family, is from The Next Generation. But it wasn't boring. Would I have cut things out? Yes. I honestly do think this episode had some pacing issues, and dropping the runtime from 50 minutes plus to about just over 40 would have helped a lot. But that could just be me. I mean, most of the emotion from this episode felt fabricated and was brought forth only by the melodramatic style of it all, so having just a bit less of that I think would have worked a lot better. Sometimes spending less time on emotional moments enables them to impact the audience longer. I also wasn't the biggest fan of the love story going on, and if I were to really think about it, that's probably what I would have cut out. Not entirely, just parts of it. Enough about that though, let's talk about the Trill. Forget Me Not did a fantastic job at world building within the Star Trek universe. Of course, there are some things I would have done differently, but that can be said about so many aspects of Star Trek in so many different iterations of it. The point here is Discovery took what we already knew about Trill society and built on that. Not only did we get to rediscover the caves of Makala and see how the government and people responsible for the symbionts have changed, but not too much. They're still very conservative and protective of this society's culture, but we also got to discover a new way for hosts to communicate with previous hosts. It doesn't even stop there, we also learned so much more about how the joining itself can work. In the last episode, some of the fandom noted that perhaps technological advancement had helped the symbiont join with a human permanently, and although that was a false theory, it was addressed here. There was a big deal made about the fact that this shouldn't necessarily be possible, and the episode here seems to imply that the symbiont itself enabled the joining to stay stable. Frankly, everything Trill related was a joy to watch, from the creative weapons to the coherent portrayal of their leaders, from the beautiful exterior sequences to the fun added fauna. I mean, it's a fish, it's a bird, it's both. It's awesome. I just love seeing alien wildlife. From a visual effects perspective, I would say that nothing is impeccable, but it's more than enough for a TV show. I mean, if we were to compare some of the sequences from the Trill experience Adira goes through here to the Mycelial Network sequences in Season 2, there is a significant difference in clarity. And although I do congratulate both for their creativity, this was a lot nicer to watch, a lot easier to watch. While we're on the topic of creativity, everything that went on in that Trill experience was great. It was very artistic, it was captivating, it had a certain mood to it. You know, it almost reminded me of that Burnham wormhole sequence from the end of Season 2, and you guys know that I love that. Anyway, the show is still struggling with a few things. Some are leftovers from the time and era in which it was originally set. What I mean is, for example, this ship is in the future now, yes, but it still is a ship of the past, and this kind of holographic display in Burnham's quarters are a bit of a stretch when it comes to technological advancement. Some other things are simply issues so ingrained into the nature of Discovery that getting rid of them or regulating them will prove to be more than challenging if an attempt to correct them is ever made. And who knows, maybe what I'm talking about doesn't need correcting to those making the show or hardcore fans of the show. What I'm talking about, for example, is the way Discovery always needs its characters to say something like, "You are two of the best minds on the ship," or "This is a ship of overachievers." Almost as if the characters and the show itself think that the audience will forget just how good everyone is at their jobs. You don't need to have your characters constantly pat each other on the back. Saru, as captain, is allowed to just give orders and expect things to be done. I find it a bit cringe personally, but as I was saying, maybe you hardcore fans of Discovery don't find that to be an issue at all, and maybe the people creating the show do that on purpose. Maybe it's not something they need to fix. Anyway, some final notes would include the Sphere Data AI. It seems to be merging with the Discovery computer, and that's pretty cool because we are essentially witnessing the birth of Zora, which was the sentience that we first met in Star Trek Short Trek's Calypso. Unrelated, but I was disappointed that Reno was not at the dinner table. I also thought Stamets was kind of a dick to Detmer, who was clearly unwell. But I mean, Stamets has always been kind of a dick, and he's probably just as unwell as Detmer and the rest of the crew, considering this whole story was about mental health. That's right, I didn't talk about Cobra, but please do not misinterpret that. He is still my favorite of the show, and I think he was the MVP of this episode. His medical log in the beginning helped set the tone. His help in pairing Burnham with Adira and his counseling efforts when it came to the crew were nice touches, and the episode almost came out being a full-on Cobra episode. You know, kind of. Anyway, mad props to Wilson Cruz for his performance. He did great. I loved it. And actually, yes, this goes without saying, the acting is good on Discovery, just generally speaking, so thumbs up to everyone else as well. For some odd reason, I feel like there was CG work done on Gray's face, not just makeup, like actual VFX. I got a Christopher Lee in The Hobbit kind of vibe, where some of those smiles came across as mustache-removed Superman CG smiles from Justice League, and it was a bit distracting in some instances. That might be because I wasn't entirely sold on the romance itself, and so my mind wandered, but still, I just wanted to point it out. Don't know if anyone else noticed. Overall, it was a good episode. A tad melodramatic, a hint too long, but the slower pace and the introspective nature of it all really did work well, and I'm just learning about Trill Society and going back to Trill was so fun. Alright, that's about it for the review. Let's now move on to the Easter eggs and references that I could find, starting with, of course, everything Trill related. For starters, this episode took us to the Trill homeworld, and so we got some Trill homeworld shots from orbit. It looks exactly like it looked in Deep Space Nine. There are some people online that are mentioning that Trill is said to have purple oceans. I think Dax is the one that said that, or mentioned that at least once in Deep Space Nine, but Deep Space Nine itself showed us the planet, and it looked like this. It had no purple oceans, so maybe it's a seasonal thing. Anyway, moving on. We also get to see the Trill logo, which is the same as we've seen on screen in other iterations of Star Trek, and this episode took us back to the caves of Makala. We've seen them before in Deep Space Nine as well. Maybe not the exact same pools or caves, or rather not the same entrance, but visually speaking I think both are pretty much the same, and it is for sure the same cave system. It's just we don't know how big or how small that cave system actually is. The Guardians were also introduced in Deep Space Nine, as was the concept of meeting one's former host, as well as hallucinating them. At one point we hear mention of isoboramine. This is a scientific, medical, technobabble thing relating to Trill physiology, also first introduced in Deep Space Nine. This isn't exactly an Easter egg, nor is it a direct reference, but also in Deep Space Nine it is established that the fact only a limited amount of Trill are able to become hosts to symbionts is a lie. The reality is, half the Trill population is able to become hosts, but the government is keeping this a secret. I won't dive too far into it, just in case watching some Trill episodes from Deep Space Nine tickles your fancy, but it would seem that the powers at B, the powers of the Trill government here, either don't know about that information, they don't know that half the Trill population could become hosts to symbionts. Maybe that information was lost, or maybe it is still a secret kept by a few elders. We also hear mention that there are no successful records of symbionts joining permanently with humans. This is a nice little tie-in to the Next Generation where a human is used as host, but only very temporarily. Quick side note, the Trill in the Next Generation did not have the iconic spots. They actually looked like this. I won't hold it against Discovery, but seeing both styles on screen would have been fun. Hopefully we can do that in a future episode of modern Star Trek. The final Deep Space Nine reference is Hasperat. It's a Bajoran dish. It looks like a wrap or a tortilla of some kind. We heard about this a lot in that show. As we said earlier, we got a Short Treks reference with the return, or rather arrival, of Zora, depending on how you want to look at it. One of Tal's former hosts is sporting a Star Trek Picard era uniform. Star Trek Picard Season 1 picked up in 2399, which places it 790 years before this very episode of Discovery. But of course, we don't yet know how long these uniforms were used for, so that doesn't really give us the most precise indication on when this guy was alive. It was nice seeing the uniform again. And finally, movie night was a big thing in Enterprise. Alright, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. What did you think of the episode? I think this was a lot of people's favorite. I think I still prefer episode 2. I like me some Space Cowboys. Anyway, did you find any Easter eggs that I didn't? Please do consider subscribing if you're not subscribed. Don't forget to like, share the video, leave a comment. You can support this channel on Patreon and become a patron like all of these wonderful people. And as usual, live long and prosper.